the ghost of the Treasury. In government, every cent should tell the story of service. Roads paved, schools built, lives improved. But sometimes, those stories are rewritten, line by line, until the numbers themselves become ghosts. It began in May 2022, when the state treasury of Louisiana reported a mysterious shortfall of $184 million. At first, officials blamed delayed federal transfers, then system errors. Then they stopped talking altogether. But behind closed doors, an internal memo circulated among senior staff, marked confidential. Preliminary forensic discrepancy identified. Source undetermined. Possible internal manipulation of ledger entries. The governor's office, fearing a political crisis, called in a forensic investigator with a reputation for solving impossible cases. Daniel Ross, a former FBI forensic accountant turned independent auditor. Ross was methodical, a quiet man in his mid-40s, known for his relentless patience. He once said, "Numbers don't hide, people do." When he arrived in Baton Rouge, he was handed access to 5 years' worth of Treasury transaction data. The first thing he noticed was that the ledger files weren't just inconsistent, they were too perfect. No rounding errors, no duplicate entries, no missing fields. In Ross's world, perfection was a red flag. He began by pulling archived transaction backups. But half the audit logs were corrupted, overwritten by an automated cleanup script. A script that shouldn't have existed. It had been manually inserted into the Treasury's accounting software just months before the shortfall appeared. When Ross cross-checked server access logs, one name surfaced repeatedly: Deputy Treasurer Carl Benton. Benton was a 30-year veteran, well-liked, trusted, known for his quiet efficiency. But the digital footprints didn't lie. He had administrative clearance to the Legacy Reconciliation Module, a subsystem few even knew existed. That's where Ross found it. A series of ghost accounts labeled simply as transfer holding number 01 through hashtag 09. Each account moved money between real budget allocations, education, infrastructure, pensions, but the trail ended in offshore clearinghouses. When Ross requested authorization to trace the transactions internationally, the state's legal department stalled. "We'll need to consult the finance committee before proceeding," they said. Days turned into weeks. Meanwhile, journalists began asking questions. The Treasury's press secretary issued vague statements about data migration inconsistencies. Ross knew the delay was deliberate, so he went off book. Using encrypted data analytics software, he reconstructed deleted transaction trails from fragmented server caches. What he found was staggering. $1.4 billion had quietly bled from state funds over an 8-year period, each withdrawal disguised as minor adjustments across hundreds of departmental budgets. The money had passed through small consulting firms, campaign donation trusts, and phantom NGOs that appeared to support education initiatives. In reality, these entities were fronts for an intricate laundering ring. Ross's next step was to identify who benefited. He noticed that every ghost account shared a common routing intermediary: the Gulf Regional Bank of Commerce, a mid-sized private institution with strong political ties. When subpoenaed records came back, they revealed that the bank's internal auditors had flagged unusual movements several times, but their reports were revised before submission to the Treasury. That revision process was signed off by Treasurer Elaine Whitmore, the highest-ranking finance official in the state. It was the unthinkable. The treasurer herself appeared complicit. Ross and his small forensic team, 2 accountants and a data engineer, began mapping connections between Whitmore, Benton, and outside contractors. They discovered that Benton's brother-in-law owned one of the shell NGOs receiving grant funding. When Ross tried to alert federal investigators, his access to the Treasury's internal systems was abruptly revoked. The official explanation: cybersecurity breach mitigation. He realized the investigation had just turned political. 2 nights later, his hotel room was broken into. Nothing stolen, except his encrypted hard drive. That was the moment Ross decided to go public. He contacted a journalist he trusted, Samantha Reed of the Chronicle, who had covered corporate fraud scandals before. He handed her partial data trails, promising the rest once verification was complete. Together, they agreed to release findings only after forensic validation, but someone must have overheard their meeting. The next morning, Samantha's car was found vandalized outside her apartment. Her laptop, gone. Ross went underground, working remotely from a secure location in Atlanta, coordinating with a small team of digital forensic specialists. They built a parallel reconstruction of the Treasury's ledgers from archive backups obtained through cloud redundancies the officials didn't know existed. The picture became clear. Over 60 shell accounts were used to siphon taxpayer money. Each transaction was split into micropayments under $250,000 to avoid detection thresholds. Those payments funded luxury estates, campaign donations, and offshore investments for a network of politicians, bankers, and government contractors. At the center of it all, Treasurer Elaine Whitmore. She had orchestrated the scheme after inheriting a flawed financial control system from her predecessor. Instead of fixing it, she exploited it, rewriting approval chains, embedding code that erased transaction footprints, and creating phantom vendors that laundered the money through layers of plausible bureaucracy. When Ross finally presented his findings to the federal task force, the scope was beyond belief. It wasn't just state-level fraud. It was systemic, affecting federal matching grants and pension distributions. The Department of Justice authorized a multi-agency operation codenamed Project Revenant. In a dramatic series of dawn raids, FBI agents entered the Louisiana Treasury, the Gulf Regional Bank, and multiple contractor offices simultaneously. Whitmore was arrested during a private fundraiser in New Orleans. Benton was detained at a suburban home, found burning stacks of paper ledgers in his backyard grill. When interrogated, Benton broke first. "It started small," he confessed. "We just shifted funds to cover campaign debts. But it grew every year, it grew." Whitmore, however, denied everything. "I've dedicated my life to this state. Those numbers are fabrications," she said in her first statement to the press. But the evidence was irrefutable. Ross's reconstructed ledgers, verified by independent auditors, showed digital timestamps, IP trails, and audit revisions, each linked to her authorization key. In court, prosecutors displayed visual timelines of the embezzlement network, glowing red lines connecting accounts across states and continents. Jurors watched as millions flowed like a web from the state's treasury into luxury holdings in the Caribbean, London, and Singapore. One shocking revelation came from a recovered email exchange between Whitmore and a foreign financier. "The public doesn't understand numbers. Elaine, they only see results. As long as the roads get paved, no one cares where the money goes." It was a final nail in her defense. After a 6-month trial, Elaine Whitmore was found guilty on 58 counts of fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to 42 years in federal prison. Benton received 18 years for conspiracy and evidence destruction. But even in victory, Ross fell hollow. Hundreds of millions were still unrecovered. Dozens of complicit minor officials escaped accountability through plea deals. And the state's reputation, tarnished for a generation. Months after the verdict, a letter arrived at Ross's private office. No return address, just a typewritten note. "The system doesn't need heroes. It needs ghosts like you, the kind who make corruption fear the dark." He never discovered who sent it. Years later, Ross would lecture forensic accounting students at Georgetown University. When asked what he learned from the case, he said, "Ghosts don't haunt buildings. They haunt systems. The invisible patterns of greed that thrive when no one's watching. Our job is to shine a light on the invisible." The Louisiana Treasury rebuilt its financial architecture using blockchain-based transparency protocols. Every transaction now publicly verifiable in real time. The scandal became a national symbol of reform, A reminder that corruption isn't an external enemy. It's an internal ghost waiting for darkness to return. Moral and call to action. Every institution, no matter how sacred, is only as honest as the people within it. Corruption begins where accountability ends. The ghost of the Treasury teaches us that transparency isn't just a safeguard. It's the soul of democracy. Governments must invest in forensic oversight, and citizens must demand it. For every ghost in the system, there must be a light strong enough to expose it.